Hello, today is Wednesday, March 13th, 2019. This is the standard kubeadm office hours. We have a kind of a light agenda today, so we might go a bit meta at the end. Starting off, Lubomir, status of the docs.
Yes, so we have a tracking issue in the kubeadm repo about the docs, and we only have four PRs to merge this cycle. And I got pinged on private by Jim and Joe about our status, and he told me that we are behind because apparently they wanted to start reviewing this week, but we still don't have the PRs up. And later today, I'm going to push my PR. Marek's PR is already up. The other PR is from Rohit. It's also up. And Iago promised to send a PR later today. So we are a bit behind on schedule. But then again, we don't really have that much new stuff. So we basically need to collect some generic comments and what we want to change from our cycle and apply the changes like later this week and next week. So yeah, that's on docs. Hopefully we can have everything up today.
I'm still doing my SIG cluster lifecycle pruning. That's going to be ongoing for a while, slowly but surely. I have to talk with stakeholders before I nuke their docs. I don't want people to get really mad at me. So it'll just take a while, but hopefully we'll prune down that setup page. And I also did, I'd also like to make sure that we distinguish between commercial and community supported stuff. So I already did that too as well.
Yeah, everything under the setup is super sparse. And there are cloud provider stakeholders there. So I think it's best to like ping people like Chris Hodge from C Cloud Provider if, like, I don't know, to get their opinion and stuff.
Yeah, I've been slowly nuking that stuff, and I'm going to work through it over time. And also, what I want to do, especially as we get cluster API providers spun online, to have that also listed as community-supported things, you know, or tools that you can use, right? I want to sort of give, on the community-facing docs, I want to give preference to the community-facing projects. They're owned and maintained by the community. This is a Kubernetes community and ecosystem, yada, yada, yada. So it's going to take a while, but, you know, it's a political minefield, so.
Yeah, it's going to be a process for at least a couple of cycles probably. And we should have some sort of a stick for this folder, like who is merging what. We don't get any pings about this folder, and people just merge documents and yeah.
Yes, I'll put ownership stuff on the top of that too.
So there's no mechanic to ping the SQL lifecycle PR reviews in case somebody adds a new file. And also the SIG docs people just approve and it goes in and that's it.
Well, there are ways we can get the labeling automatically, and that forced labeling will then at least give us some way of signaling, at least to the docs people, that, you know, that they shouldn't just blindly approve, that it requires approval. So you can do two parts. You can put the metadata in the metadata section as well as the goop and the owners files, and I can add that to my to-do list.
Yeah, and eventually we have to remove all the owners in separate files. At least that was the discussion with SIG docs, and only rely on owners files with owner aliases inside the appropriate folders.
Yep, that should be done with the. I'll take a look. I'll go talk with them. Some of that was done already. I don't know what the state is anymore.
Yeah, a lot of docs still have the owners on top. We should stop doing that. I mean, we should probably do a cleanup and remove everything. Also, in terms of this folder, the Minikube docs, I spoke to, I think it's Thomas from Google. Yeah, Minikube, the docs are so outdated that at this point we are getting like a spam of issues in the website about their docs. And they need to take action on this as soon as possible.
I can force that. I'll talk with them.
Yeah, or otherwise we should basically find someone that wants to take this and nuke the docs for them, but ideally they should have consent with whoever is nuking stuff.
Any other last question, comments, complaints, concerns on docs, other than it's an ongoing thing we should really maintain?
If you need help, Luminary, with anything more this week, let me know. Ping me.
Okay, thank you. Occasionally we have kubeadm docs that need update and maybe somebody doesn't have the time. So I can ping you if you have, yeah, if you can make a small change or something like that. The website repo is a bit weird in the way they merge branches. It's kind of unique, but still it's manageable.
Yeah, just let me know.
Okay, thanks.
Next up, Kinder. Fabrizio.
It is in agenda? Really? No, I give an update. So for people who doesn't know what Kinder is the selector replacement for the kubeadm playground. It is a tool that uses kind as a library, and it was designed to make the developer experience for kubeadm contributor much more easy. So it will be much more easy to set up an HA cluster locally, to test upgrade, to test join control plane, and so on. In the last few days, we managed to get the few change required in kind merged. So I think that in 1 or 2 days, I will push Kinder in the kubeadm repo with some documents, and if people can use it for testing the 1.14 release, this will be great, because as everyone know, we don't have signal for HA, and also for the utility command that are in kubeadm. So this is the status. I hope that I can push something later today.
For those, I talked with Fabrizio about this topic too as well, is that over time, I'd like to see most of the functionality that is in Kinder pushed into the core of Kind, such as phases, to minimize the forking that's required, or the dependency graph problems that are required for us to maintain. In the long term, I would like to see us not do this. But I think it's very useful for kubeadm developers to be able to have a localized environment for doing their testing, without them having to spin up a whole Vagrant environment or going to a cloud provider.
So we have to think about how are we going to manage the test infra deployer scenario, because the test infra deployer for Kind currently is bound to the Kind binary, and it only can build a Kind binary from a certain repo. So if we cannot use Kinder for end-to-end testing currently, and so next cycle, if you want upgrades, we have a couple of options. One of them is to make a mechanic to use Kinder in end-to-end testing, or the alternative is to push some sort of a upgrade / SKU testing support in kind. Yes.
The biggest impediment currently with getting the upgrade SKU testing in kind is having phases support. And I talked with, if you have phases support, you can break down the control of how you do the deployment, and then you could have the upgrade as part of that deployment scenario. And as added as a separate step. But that's going to make its way into their next release, which is supposed to be this week, I think. He said there's only a couple of minor things to get that in, and then he should be able to push that in. The machinations for us to get upgrade support won't be very pretty. It'll be kind of ugly, but it'll be doable.
So Ben is currently refactoring the kind GVK config, basically. But I'm not seeing support for executing actions or skipping actions. And actions are basically the current way of doing phases, like it's a similar mechanic. We don't have a way to skip the creation of a Kubernetes cluster using kubeadm from the CLI or from the config.
Well, there's that issue that Fabrizio opened, and we talked about it too, and the one that I opened. So I'll follow up with deeper state understanding next week with Ben. But he was on the same page with regards to making sure that before the next release, that making sure that some form of phases existed in order for us to skip the actual full installation process.
Yeah, to my understanding, if we are to make basically there's currently ongoing change with regards to the latest config, and it has to happen now if we want this change in, or otherwise we have to wait for the next config.
Well, they're on a monthly cadence, so that will still be before the 115 cycle ends. So if we need to, we have two strategies. One strategy is to push on kind. The other strategy is to support kinder in test infra. And I think we'll choose that probably in a couple of weeks time frame about what strategy we want to approach. And then long term still get to the point where kind performs the operations we need in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I agree. So the target solution in my mind, in my opinion, is that we have kind do what we want. Ben agreed on 2 points. One is to have phases, at least in the library, and he's working on this. Second, he agreed also that we can add some alpha command on the kind library that allows us to get access to the phases, even if they don't surface on the config or in the CLI. So there is a general agreement. Unfortunately, the project is still really dependent to the time that Ben merges the biggest changes. So I think that we can manage it in 114. There are some details that I want to discuss with Lupomir or who is interested in how do we want to implement this test. For instance, for the upgrade, the existing upgrade test basically spin up a cluster, run end-to-end, and then make an upgrade and run again end-to-end. Do we want to support this workflow, or do we want spin up a cluster, make upgrade, and run end-to-end because the end-to-end on the simple cluster basically will be covered by something else. So the generalizing is that we have to define what is the requirement in order to understand if the phases as they are designed are enough, or we should change also something in the kubeadm executor.
Yes. So in my opinion, we shouldn't test before upgrading, and we should only test after, because like you said, we already have coverage for the cluster before upgrade in the regular tests. And I have some ideas about how we do the upgrades. For instance, so we can discuss, do we even have a, do we even need a separate image, node image, or do we like place the binaries inside the existing node image? And I'm probably gonna go with the second option here, but we can discuss this later. In terms of the roadmap, so if we don't have a solution until like 1 month after 1.14 is released, or at least if we don't have a plan, I suggest that we start looking into whatever options we have. And Kinder can still be used as a backup plan with a bash script. The basically kubetest supports that with a flag that is called test CMD. So we basically bypass the deployer, the kubetest kind deployer, and we can execute any script. This is like the backup plan we can use, but ideally we should get some sort of support with the phases. But Ben is a busy guy, and we should like really estimate what is doable, and we don't want to force him too much.
Do we have an issue that is generic kubeadm? That's the HA issue. Do we have a generic upgrade issue for kubeadm testing for 1.15? We should just track that stuff there.
Yes, we do. I don't think it exactly mentions like the problem with upgrades and kinds, but we have some generic testing issues. And I just moved this particular one to the 1.15 milestone the other day. But I mean, I'm tracking everything here already as a plan in my to-do list. So.
But I guess the team was asking if we have an issue on the kind repo.
So Fabrizio, you had a issue that is called kubeadm upgrades deep dive in parentheses.
Okay. So what we have to do is to keep this issue and do another round of refinement or requirements. And this will be the input for Ben.
Yep.
Okay.
Why don't we list all the details in that issue, and then when we open up issues, we can cross-reference them. As we open up issues in kind, we can cross-reference them against our meta topic on upgrade tests.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to add a note later today to add some comments about how we want to proceed. And yes, okay.
Any other questions about Kinder and kind and testing and jiggery? For what it's worth, I think this is a huge step forwards for the project to be able to do separate CI integration that doesn't actually force you to stand up and be dependent upon some type of provider. So it's good to see the progress. I know there's some weird bumps in the road, but we'll get there.
Hopefully, yes.
Next step, CRD discussion and brief future plan for kubeadm.
Yeah, so this is a big one. If you have something else, we can skip and leave this for the end. I just wanted to say that we had a generally fruitful discussion yesterday with the overall SIG about what is the plan with CRDs. and how we handle them. And I just wanted to raise a bit of a concern that I have, that we should be very careful how we do the whole CRD business in kubeadm. And I think we should follow the pattern that we basically bundle and hard code a bunch of manifests inside kubeadm and claim that this is the supported minimal viable cluster. And if somebody diverges from that, we can claim that this is not a supported cluster. Because in this case, we're talking about not like somebody replacing kubeproxy with an ingress. We are talking about like core API stuff that we should even evaluate if it passes conformance when we start actually separating these things in time. So this is my concern. We should be very careful what we break and how we expose this functionality to the user. And to, from my perspective, like the basic user shouldn't even know about these breakages in the API.
So I have very strong opinions that align with Lucas's on this particular topic. There's this weird line in the sand where developer productivity for creating APIs is a very useful thing versus like the user doesn't care. They just want a functioning cluster, right? And that tension between developer productivity and flexibility versus sort of user experience is a real tension. I do think we should obfuscate it from the user so they don't see it. It should be totally opaque to them such that kubeadm does all the work under the hood. I do think eventually in the fullness of time that we will want to use some form of add-on management, possibly a combination of the current add-on manager incantation that Justin Santa Barbara was working on, as well as an incorporation of some sort of meta templating thing that is the bundle stuff / customize. To me, we're nowhere near ready for that, not even close. Because in order to make that really viable, people need to nuke the cluster directory. So if you look at whatever happens and what happened last cycle with the testing support for CSI modifications, which were a core CRD integration, in order for them to enable that testing and to get that signal as part of the CI, they had this weird add-on management, which is underneath /cluster, that was enabled only on GCE deployments in order to get that CI signal out. That I think is antithetical to the community, and it's a total hack job. So I think we need to hold Google's feet to the fire on this particular type of behavior, as well as like not just like API behavior, but also behavior, to make sure that like they are doing right by not by the whole community, because no one uses the /cluster directory other than Google, right? So I think it's going to take a long time. I'm totally in agreement that the manifests need to be baked into kubeadm for better or for worse for some period of time. But we also need to figure out a way to keep tracking these things as they start to federate in other repositories. So I'll keep everybody in the loop here. And I don't think anyone has any intention of breaking kubeadm because pretty much the whole community now depends upon this central nugget.
So in terms of downstream consumers of kubeadm, like the cluster API, do you think that they are going to benefit from this type of add-on management of core APIs?
No, I think the sole purpose of add-on management of core APIs is developer productivity. I don't see it as a benefit to end users or consumers at all. So I see it as a way. There are benefits for things like I want to create an appliance that's like Kubernetes but has very trimmed down behavior, And if you care about stuff like that, you could create an appliance, which is like, Kubernetes in my, I don't know, blender, right? my Kubernetes blender only runs pods, but it doesn't have any of the other stuff around it. That type of behavior might be useful for people creating appliances. And that's the end user consumer functionality that you'd want to enable in the grand scheme of things, because there are cases where maybe having a Kubernetes in a car makes a lot of sense, but you want to be able to like limit the amount of things that can run there, right? I don't know if Blender makes as much sense, but you never know. This world's crazy.
Yeah.
I think that from kubeadmin point of view, this is somehow related to the discussion that we started about customize.
Yeah, there's a couple different layers to customize, but I really want to just put that whole section of Goop into the quote-unquote add-on manager, and we just reference the add-on manager as a library in the grand scheme of things. In the fullness of time, we don't even care. We just reference this library, and we have options that filter through from kubeadm.
But in my opinion, what is happening, so in kubeadmin, what we have, that kubeadmin generates basically some static pods and creates some config map, some RBAC rules, and we already have a request for people to being able to customize these things. And this is where the discussion about customize started. Okay. Now the set of kubeadmin that kubeadmin should install, maybe that will increase because we have to install CRD, core CRD, okay, but from one side, and from the other side might be that some XML that today are managed by kubeadmin will shift to the add-on side, to the add-on manager. This is how I see the problem. But the fact that the add-on manager will install the kube proxy does not remove from kubeadmin the fact that kubeadmin creates some resources. So it is still open, the fact that what we do with our resources. We change the current, we keep them encoded, or we generated in a way that can only be customized up to a certain limit, or we rethink and we took an upgrade like bootkube that first generate all the manifest and then apply all the manifest.
I think this is getting super meta. I think we need to think about it and sort of get to the point where things are actually real, and then we can actually think about breaking down the problem space into a set of composable units and having a flow for this. I think at this point, the CRD discussion is totally not even baked. It's like bread pudding. I wouldn't even call it bread pudding. It's like ingredients, right? You got basically eggs on your counter. You want to make a cake. So it's nowhere near ready for prime time. But I think we should still continue the conversation about what in the fullness of time what we would like to see. But I can't, without some actual tangible layering of how we envision the pieces fitting together. It's too abstract.
Okay, I think that I don't know when we will have planning for the next cycle. Mm-hmm. But if I can manage, I will put the customized point as a idea that we can work on.
I definitely think customize should be like an alpha/experimental feature. I do think it'd be highly useful, but There's a bunch of things about Kustomize I'm not entirely sold on in the fullness of time, right? The how Kustomize works is a little, it subsumes a large part of the API. If you try to vendor in Kustomize, you realize that it's one of those depth graphs of doom. And we want to make sure that we're careful there, so that way it's a minimal reusable component that does just what we need to do and doesn't actually try to subsume the entire Kubernetes API again. Because all we really want is partial specialization of manifests. Because the problem we originally had was we had knobs for everything, right? And users wanted to add more features, so we added more knobs, then we trimmed that back, and then we had pass-throughs. And in reality, we would like to be able to say, like, we do a generation phase with some well-defined knobs, and then anything else outside of that scope goes into this template engine that allows them to do custom overrides for that environment. The quote-unquote template engine, Kustomize is currently like ahead, but I wouldn't say it's the de facto standard.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, what I was thinking is how to define a roadmap for kubeadmin for starting doing these 3 steps that you described. So create the basis with the few knobs that we manage. Be ready to apply, customize, or whatever templating, and then apply to the cluster.
Yeah, I think it's just a separate like phase, right? It's one phase at the end or near the end that gets applied. We'd have to take a look at the phases diagram again.
Yes,
and make sure that we're.
Yes, the real problem is that there are. I started to look at this. There are, in my opinion, 2 ways to do this. One way is to basically keep the structure of the phases that we have now, and for each phase apply Kustomize at the end. I make an example. When I create the kubeadmin config, I create kubeadmin config, some RBAC rules, and so on. This is a phase. I can put at the end, inside this phase, the customized thing. Or I can really split the generation of manifest, the preparation of manifest to the apply to the cluster.
Sounds very proposal-y. Why don't we work on proposals, and we can start planning next week? Because there's a couple different ways we could hem and haw about this one, but I think it's highly useful to the users, right? I think users, we get asked all the time for people wanting some weird partial specialization plumbed through from top to bottom, and we have to like, there's gymnastics with the config in order to make that work, and we really just want to make it easy for them. So.
Yeah, I will try to start write down something or make some schema in what can be the possible workflow, pro and cons. I hope to being able to do for next week, but I'm a little bit busy, and honestly, I try to reserve the time I have to get the release very well tested. Because I don't rely on the current signal that we have. So
yeah, our signal is definitely not all the way there, especially for the HA bits.
We need to evaluate the upgrade scenarios if we enable such customized knobs all over the place. And that's, I think, the biggest culprit.
Yeah. Why don't we table this discussion, because it gets kind of fractal, and we can have a whole discussion just on how we want to do templatization or partial specialization or whatever you want to call it. So that's a large topic, and we should definitely think about how we want to address that in the long haul.
Okay.
Sounds good.
But with regards to your CRD point, I think I'm we're all in violent agreement, and that we're going to bake manifests in for some indeterminate period of time until add-on manager is more mature, and then we have some thoughts underneath our belt with regards to how to do this, because it's way too abstract at this point.
I don't think there's even a decision in that Google Doc. There were a bunch of proposals of how to do, where to place the manifest. Like for instance, in a folder next to the API server. I don't think anybody decided yet how to approach the problem.
There's no decision at all. We hated all the options. So Tim spitballed and created several different things, and we all kind of went back and forth. And I'm not talking about myself in the third person. It's Tim Hawken. It created the initial document, and then we all spitballed and we hated all the options. So I don't think there's a way that we all like yet. Again, this topic, it's very frustrating to me because it was kind of thrust upon cluster lifecycle from API machinery, and they didn't really think about how it would be consumed from the end user side of things. It was more of an enablement feature for how to get APIs to graduation, but the downstream management of it and lifecycle of it needs a lot of thought because it is weird and thorny.
There's definitely a detachment between API machinery and the UX people, or the people who rely on CLI, or basically API machinery needs to better overview they make a change and it propagates everywhere because they are in the core of the project. We should table this.
Yeah, you're not going to get any argument from me. If you want to have a separate conversation that's not recorded where I can use colorful language, I'll happily sit down with you. Because I've got a lot of history, and I think I got some axes behind me that are ground to a fine sharpened point.
This will be a great occasion for learning some new English for me. So
I'm starting to develop languages myself on this topic. Okay, so something for next cycle, we have to get the config map walks working. One of the reasons is the cluster API is probably going to depend on that, with control plane nodes joining the cluster. And also Ben is trying to do this in kind nowadays to parallelize the joining of control plane nodes, but we don't support that because we don't have the locks yet. And we have to, as a topic for the planning session, we have to possibly start thinking about how to approach this problem. And I just wanted to mention that.
That will probably be a sub-bullet item for HA to GA, which will probably be like one of the higher priority items. So
please go ahead.
Go ahead.
About HA going to GA, so next cycle, once we get the signal, we can promote to beta. And also we might be able to do the config map walks. So then what will be the criteria for GA? What is it?
The testing is the big one, and the other bullet points or the other issues that are currently open with regards to HA. I need to double check the user experience walkthrough, but in the ideal world, it's just the control plane join, just one command does it all. It's all magical and hand wavy, kind of like the Docker join. But having the full CI signal and test apparatus all built up behind it as well.
Yeah, technically, we need a config map lock testing, some refining on the UX for the upgrade. Yep. And with those, we can pass beta. And then, in my opinion, we should wait 1 or 2 cycles before going to GA for user feedback.
That's reasonable.
Yes, sounds good.
Yeah, I think as long as we unblock the other systems that want to use this in a more declarative fashion in the next cycle, I think that'll be super useful.
There's absolutely no point to rush GA. If we have a stable beta that is tested and documented, we can stay and wait for feedback even. Unless we want the flair of promoting to GA. That should be the only reason for us to bump.
No, we've always traditionally in kubeadm been very conservative, and it's been to our benefit, not detriment. Although some commercialization aspects have been to our detriment, but for the project and community, it has been to our benefit. So I think we should continue the same path forwards because it is proven to be a good guide for how we approach things, and it also helps the end user experience. Any other group topics? Other than we should come next week. Next week we'll start to do planning for 115. So if you have axes you want to bring out, let us know, and we'll start to get some priorities listed down for what we want to address in the 115 cycle.
Hey Tim, I have a question on that. So for the artifact generation, should I make issues for the different areas so we can play on those, or just leave it as one whole thing? Like, should I make a GitHub issues for like pieces of it?
Well, you might want to create an umbrella. So like typically the way we work these things for like high level deliverables, macro deliverables, we create umbrella issues. And those umbrella issues break down and then have references to all the other sub-elements that are required in order for us to say it's been done.
Okay.
But I would wait until we actually have the discussion, and then we can think about the pieces that will be needed. But if you have ideas of what you want, I highly recommend, why don't I update the notes here and add a section for planning, and then feel free to have topics listed below, put your name next to it, and then we'll kind of shuffle sort as a sub-project and talk about what the priorities are.
Okay.
Any other last questions, comments, complaints, concerns?
I added a quick one. This is more of a notification for next cycle. Because since I've been here, the release team always pings us on our tracking issues in the Kubernetes. Before it was the Kubernetes community repo, now it's Kubernetes enhancement. And we have tracking issues there that with the original post that I cannot edit, and it's out of date and it's wrong. To my knowledge, only the milestone maintainers can do it. And I posted a big proposal to the release, to SIG release about this problem. And also we have a generic problem of how we track the PRs and issues for instance, in kubeadm, what issues do we have for this cycle? And also what PRs and what is the testing, what is the docs. This is super chaotically tracked by the release team currently. And I basically wanted to simplify this, but this might take a while. And so I wanted to ask, like, how, who can edit these tracking issues? We need updates in the original posts of the tracking issues. Like last cycle, we had some from Lucas, from Joby. I cannot edit these tickets. I can only post a comment. And yeah, it's.
Why don't you get a list together of the tracking issues? I also want to talk with SIG release and SIG architecture about how we do software development, because it's messed up.
Honestly, I'm confused on this is changing, because when we started with CAP were design proposal meant to track the function developed across different minors, and now we are changing to having CAP for minors, having a CAP with a tracking release, a tracking issue So I'm confused about the role of the cap. The cap shall document a feature or what we do for a feature in a cycle.
Yep. I don't think this is probably the best venue for this discussion, but it's well understood. I have the same problems currently. My job right now is going to be help to try and fix that and talk about it for 115. So I do have that on my list of things to address that I have to go talk with SIGArch and other people about. And there's a conversation topic tomorrow, and I'll even add it to the agenda.
So currently, the cap, to my understanding, when you create the original proposal for the feature, you like dump the whole information in the cap. And like we are doing in kubeadm features, we have to amend the cap each cycle with the addition of a new sub-feature or the extension of basically what we are working on related to this feature in the cycle. We have to add comments in the history of the cap.
I think that's the ideal scenario, and then we actually get that all merged in before the cycle. But right now, it's a bifurcated, weird Rube Goldberg machine where it has a couple different parts to it that is not just updating the cap, right? And I think that's the problem as well. There's we have tracking issues, we have caps that are not actually fully defined and formed. So now we also have these other people who are looking at the tracking issues, then looking at our milestones. And again, it's not, this is a larger problem for Kubernetes, not just us in particular. And it needs to kind of be percolated up. And I plan on talking about that soon.
So what we can do in the next cycle at least is to try to update our tracking issues for HA and things like that, and in the k/enhancements repo, and have them up to date. And also I can propose myself as a milestone maintainer. I mean, I'm not insisting, but because I like the release team pings us, and I have to ping Fabrizio as a milestone maintainer, now our team, or Lucas.
I thought you were a milestone maintainer.
You are always online, so who better than you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also a problem for me. Eventually, I'm going to burn out, and I might not be always online then.
This will be good for you, eh?
So yeah, feel free to PR to become a milestone maintainer. I'll happily approve. You shouldn't have to go through rigmarole there. You've been very active throughout the project, so it's not a big problem. But I do think the meta point needs addressing in that we have a weird non-documented process for tracking and releasing things out in the wild. And that needs to change, especially for 115. So
it's very confusing.
Yeah, I've been on the project since the beginning, and it's confusing to me, so you're not alone.
Yeah, I always feel like I'm asking random questions because I don't quite know how it works. So.
It's one of those things like stepping on, like who wants to jump on the hand grenade and try to make the community develop a standard process for doing things. And everyone's like, no thanks, we'll do a little thing over here, and then now we have to duct tape these two things together. So it's not an easy thing to do. I do think that they're making progress, but it's very disruptive to make a project of 1,000 people who are working on things all go in the same direction.
Apparently, there's some sort of a tool that is currently being developed in private, and I'm not sure why in private.
Yeah, that's another thing I need to go fix. Yeah.
This tool is supposed to handle caps and stuff like that, and also the tracking of the connection between caps and tracking issues. I'm not sure how it's going to work. Yeah,
there should be only one. I think we need a Highlander. Either you do caps or you do tracking issues. You don't do both. And if we're going to use caps as the single source of truth, then we should try to push that tool out into the open. So again, well heard. I hear you loud and clear. I know it's a problem. I'm going to go, and we should also add you to the milestone maintainers. And I'll go and talk with SIGArch as well as Joe on this because he also believes that this is a big problem. So, any other last questions, comments, complaints, concerns?
Sorry, I was incredibly late. I don't know if you discussed, Rafael here, if you discussed this integration testing for upload and downloading secrets. Is this something we want to merge for 1.14 or we should wait?
Wait.
All right.
So, I mean, it's not a critical bug fix, but it's very nice to have in the branch at least, because otherwise, if we, I mean, it's not a problem because Rafael, it's only going to be a problem if we backports a HA fix that might be breaking inside the 1.14 branch. So if we break somehow the old branch, it's going to be useful only then. Otherwise, if we merge it in master, because it's a unit test / integration test, we can still have it in the master repo, and it's useful in the master repo. But for the old branch, it's not a problem. But still, I see the value. I see the value, but yeah, we just don't merge non-critical fixes and features to the old branch.
Yeah, of course it can wait. And basically the end-to-end tests are going to do the proper testing of the whole feature. So yeah.
And by the way, we need a lot more integration tests like this one, because I think there are multiple areas where we don't test what we do with config maps. If I'm not wrong, we just don't test them with the box.
Well, we manually test them, so that, but it's not. There is no automation around some of this stuff, and at the end of every cycle, we mechanical Turk it out the door across the group. And I do agree that the whole purpose of building, because kubeadm is on this intersection of integration with multiple components, that we started building the end-to-end tests for kubeadm, but we never actually hooked them all up and got them all running and had them as a separate suite and fully did all the work. But that should be part of the work for next cycle. So,
can you, Tim, can you please tell me who is the current maintainer of the upgrade framework? Like the person in charge, because we have problems there.
Which upgrade framework?
In the end-to-end testing framework.
For the GCE upgrade tests?
Yes.
It was Robert Bailey.
I also see Chris Rousey as one of the contributors there.
You can ping Chris Rousey and Justin Santa Barbara.
Yeah. Yeah. We are fighting a potential bugging Golang right now. So I wanted to ask, like, who is the owner of this stuff in general?
The upgrade test is Chris Rousey, Justin Santa Barbara are the actual SIG cluster lifecycle owners for that GU.
Yeah.
Golang stuff kind of hits across multiple people. So.
Okay, thanks.
All right, round 3. Any last questions, comments, complaints, concerns? Going once, twice, 3 times. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.